Welcome to 33 of the dumbest, weirdest, and most delightfully brain-melting scientific theories humanity ever took seriously. These aren't just outdated ideas. They're full-blown facepalms and lab coats. Buckle your logic belt, because this is history's ultimate blooper reel, where bad science meets great confidence. 1. Picture this. You leave a pile of sweaty, dirty rags in a corner, maybe toss in some wheat for good measure, and bam! 21 days later, as some recipes claimed, you've got yourself a fresh batch of mice. No, this isn't a medieval episode of Hoarder's Pest Edition. This was legit science for centuries. The theory of spontaneous generation proposed that living creatures could just poof into existence from non-living matter. Maggots from rotting meat? Obviously. Eels from river slime? Absolutely. A scorpion from basil leaves left under a brick? Don't even question it. It took until Louis Pasteur and his fancy swan neck flasks in the 19th century to finally convince people that, no, life doesn't just randomly assemble itself like a flat-pack piece of furniture with terrible instructions. The relief of not finding a badger in your sock drawer must have been immense. 2. Feeling a bit grumpy? That's probably too much black bile, making you melancholic. A bit too excitable and optimistic? Excess blood, my friend, making you sanguine. For over 2,000 years, from ancient Greece right up through the Renaissance and beyond, your health, personality, and general vibe were dictated by the balance of 4 bodily fluids. Blood, which made you sanguine or optimistic. Phlegm, leading to a phlegmatic, calm, perhaps a bit slow demeanor. Yellow bile, causing a choleric or fiery, irritable nature. And black bile, resulting in a melancholic, sad, and pensive state. Too much of one, not enough of another, and you were in for a world of humoral hurt. Treatments? Oh, they were delightful. Bloodletting, induced vomiting, highly questionable enemas, or specific diets to counteract the dominant humor. Basically, if it involved getting something out of you in a dramatic fashion, it was probably on the menu. Imagine explaining to your boss you're late because your phlegm was a bit dominant this morning, needed an extra purge. Good times. 3. Got a lumpy head? Congratulations! You might be a genius or a kleptomaniac, or perhaps you just bumped your head. Phrenology, all the rage in the 19th century, proposed that the shape and bumps on your skull directly corresponded to your personality traits and mental abilities. Specific areas of the brain were supposedly linked to things like amativeness, essentially your urge to get frisky, destructiveness, benevolence, or even philoprogenitiveness, which was the love of offspring. Yes, that too was a bump you could supposedly feel. Phrenologists would meticulously feel people's heads, sometimes using elaborate calipers to diagnose their character. Ah, yes, this prominent bump above your ear clearly indicates a propensity for arguing about pineapple on pizza, while this dip here suggests you'll never master the kazoo. It was basically palm reading for your cranium, and just about as scientifically sound, leading to some truly bizarre character assessments. 4. Before we knew about those pesky little things called germs, what did people think caused widespread diseases like cholera or the plague? Bad smells, of course. The Miasma theory posited that diseases were spread by miasmas, noxious, foul-smelling vapors rising from decaying organic matter, swamps, stagnant water, or just generally unpleasant places. If it stank, it was probably trying to kill you. People believed the very air in certain locales was poisonous. This led to some interesting public health measures, like trying to combat cholera outbreaks by burning barrels of tar in the streets, or firing cannons to disperse the foul air, or even carrying around sweet-smelling pomanders to ward off the deadly stenches. While it did encourage some useful sanitation, since cleaning up smelly stuff is generally good, it slightly missed the mark on the actual invisible microbial cause. Close, but no microscopic cigar. 5. This one is delightfully bonkers and wonderfully visual. The doctrine of signatures, popular from antiquity through the Renaissance, held that God, or nature if you prefer that term, kindly marked plants and other natural things to show us what they were good for medicinally. It was like a divine IKEA instruction manual for your ailments. So, a plant with heart-shaped leaves? Obviously for heart conditions. Walnuts look like tiny brains, complete with folds, great for headaches and cognitive issues. Eyebright flowers resemble little eyes, perfect for eye ailments. Lungwort, with its spotted leaves like diseased lungs, was for, you guessed it, lung problems. It's like nature's own "what you see is what you get" pharmacy. While some of these remedies might have coincidentally worked due to actual chemical properties, the logic was pure visual association. This knobbly root looks like an arthritic finger, therefore it cures arthritis. The possibilities were endless and probably mostly useless, but very creatively justified. 6. Before modern chemistry figured out what fire actually is, a rapid oxidation process for the science nerds out there, 17th and 18th century scientists came up with phlogiston. This was a hypothetical fire-like element supposedly contained within combustible substances and released during burning. So, when wood burned, it was because it was losing its phlogiston, becoming dephlogisticated ash. Things that burned well, like charcoal or oil, were considered rich in phlogiston. The mental gymnastics they had to do to explain why some metals gained weight when they rusted, a process they considered a slow form of burning, were truly Olympic level. Their solution? Phlogiston must have negative weight. Imagine trying to weigh something that makes things lighter by being in them. Eventually, Antoine Lavoisier came along, did some careful experiments with oxygen, and basically said, "Guys, it's oxygen, and phlogiston can go, well, phlogist off." 7. Oh, the poor, misunderstood uterus. For thousands of years, if a woman was experiencing pretty much any ailment, from anxiety and fainting spells to irritability, shortness of breath, or loss of appetite, a common diagnosis was hysteria, caused by a wandering womb. Yes, they believed the uterus could detach itself and go on a little internal road trip, pressing on other organs and causing all sorts of chaos. If it wandered up, it could cause choking sensations. If down, well, other issues. Treatments included pleasant smells like roasted beaver testicles, no joke, to lure the womb back down because apparently it had a sensitive and rather peculiar nose. Less pleasantly, foul smells were applied to the nose to drive it away from the upper body. It's a miracle women survived ancient gynecology, frankly. Sorry, can't come to the chariot races. My womb's feeling a bit adventurous today and is currently trying to tickle my liver. 8. Got a toothache that feels like tiny demons are jackhammering your jaw? For thousands of years, across cultures from ancient Mesopotamia to Shakespearean England, the culprit was believed to be toothworms. These microscopic, writhing critters were thought to burrow into your teeth, gnawing away and causing excruciating pain in cavities. So-called evidence often included finding small, worm-like structures in decayed teeth, which were likely just nerve fibers or food debris. Treatments were wonderfully imaginative. Fumigation with henbane seeds, which, when burned, released tiny, wriggling ash particles that convincingly looked like expelled worms. Applying poultices of questionable ingredients. Or chanting intricate incantations to banish the little beasts. Imagine your dentist today saying, looks like a nasty infestation of dentovermiculi. We'll need the incense, a small chanting choir, and possibly a very tiny harpoon. Modern dentistry suddenly seems a lot less terrifying, doesn't it? 9. This one's a doozy, and put incredible pressure on expectant mothers. The theory of maternal impression held that a pregnant woman's thoughts, emotions, or even things she saw or experienced could directly imprint physical characteristics onto her developing fetus. So, if a pregnant woman saw a rabbit and got scared, her child might be born with a hair lip. If she craved strawberries intensely and touched her skin, the baby might have a strawberry-shaped birthmark, technically a nevus, in that exact spot. Witnessing a fire could result in a baby with red marks. It's like your unborn child was a highly sensitive mood ring, but for permanent physical traits sculpted by mom's daily life. This led to advice for pregnant women to surround themselves only with beautiful objects and thoughts, lest they accidentally curse their offspring with a birthmark shaped like that weird-looking dog from down the street. Or, heaven forbid, the face of a grumpy neighbor. 10. Ready for some outdated genetic soap opera that sounds like a daytime TV plot? Tleggony was the belief that a female's previous sexual partner could influence the physical characteristics of her offspring with a later partner. So, if a woman had a child with one man, and then later had a child with a different man, the second child could still inherit traits, such as eye color or temperament, from the first man. It's like a genetic ghost haunting future generations, with the first partner's essence somehow lingering. This theory was particularly popular in animal breeding circles. A key piece of proof often cited was Lord Morton's famous mare, which supposedly produced striped offspring after being mated with a quagga and then later with a normal horse. It occasionally reared its head in human discussions, often with some rather unpleasant social and racial implications. Thankfully, Gregor Mendel and his P's eventually sorted out how inheritance actually works, and Tleggony was relegated to the WTF were they thinking pile of history. 11. For about 1500 years, the dominant model of the universe, championed by Ptolemy, placed the Earth squarely, immovably, and rather smugly at the center of everything. The sun, moon, planets, and stars all dutifully revolved around us in perfect celestial spheres, like a cosmic entourage. It's a rather flattering view, isn't it? Yes, sun, you may orbit me. The problem was, planets occasionally do this annoying thing called retrograde motion, where they appear to move backward in the sky. To explain this while keeping Earth as the VIP, astronomers had to invent increasingly complex systems of epicycles, little circles whose centers moved along bigger circles, known as deferents. It became an incredibly convoluted cosmic Rube Goldberg machine, all to avoid admitting that maybe, just maybe, we weren't the star of the show. Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler eventually crashed that geocentric party with a heliocentric hangover. 12. Ever wonder how you see things? Well, for a very long time, a popular idea, going back to ancient Greeks like Plato and Euclid and lasting for over 1,000 years, was the emission theory. This proposed that our eyes actively emitted rays, like tiny visual lasers or invisible tentacles that would touch or feel objects, allowing us to see them. So you weren't passively receiving light. You were an active participant, basically groping the world with your eye beams. How this worked at night, or how we could see distant stars, those must have been some incredibly powerful and fast eye beams, was a bit hand-wavy, often involving theories about the eye rays interacting with sunlight or a fire within the eye. It's a wonderfully action-packed view of sight. Stand back, I'm about to see that sandwich with my ocular feelers. Thankfully, Al Hazen and later scientists helped us understand that light actually enters our eyes. Less superhero-esque, but probably more accurate. 13. This was a particularly optimistic and ultimately tragically wrong theory that gained traction in the American West, Australia, and other arid regions during the 19th century push for agricultural expansion. The idea was that human settlement and agricultural development, literally, plowing the land, planting trees, even the smoke from trains and the vibrations from human activity, would magically cause an increase in rainfall, making arid lands fertile. Just start farming and the rain will come. The heavens will open. It was a comforting belief for settlers moving into dry areas, heavily promoted by land speculators. Unfortunately, meteorology doesn't quite work that way. While large-scale land use changes can have some impact on local climate, simply tilling the soil doesn't summon rain clouds on demand. This led to a lot of heartbreak, dust bowls, and abandoned farms when the inevitable droughts returned. Mother Nature, it turns out, doesn't take requests based on agricultural effort. 14. Alchemy, the original get-rich-quick scheme of the scientific world, wrapped in layers of mysticism and secrecy. For centuries, alchemists chased the dream of transmutation, specifically turning base metals like lead or iron into pure, shiny gold. This wasn't just about wealth, though that was certainly a big part of it. It was tied to spiritual purification, the search for the elixir of life for immortality, and the Philosopher's Stone, a mythical substance that could do both. Their labs were filled with bizarre concoctions. Imagine dragon's blood or unicorn horn powder, or at least what was sold as such, complex distillations, secret symbols, and a lot of wishful thinking, often involving heating things up for very, very long times. While they never actually managed to make gold from lead, spoiler alert. alchemists did lay some groundwork for modern chemistry through their experimentation with different substances and development of lab equipment. So, thanks for the beakers, guys, even if the gold thing was a bit of a bust. 15. Forget solid ground beneath your feet. For centuries, various thinkers, writers, and outright kooks have proposed that the Earth is actually hollow. And not just a little bit hollow, but potentially containing entire inner worlds, complete with their own civilizations, unique flora and fauna, maybe even its own miniature sun. From Edmund Halley, yes, the comet guy, who briefly theorized concentric shells inside Earth, to John Cleves Sims Jr., who fanatically campaigned for an expedition to the North Pole to find one of the giant holes he believed led inside, the hollow Earth theory has had some surprisingly persistent believers. Imagine commuting to work through a tunnel to the inner Earth. Traffic was terrible. A giant mole blocked the magma tube again, and the inner sun was too bright. While seismology has pretty definitively shown our planet is largely solid, the idea of a secret world beneath our feet is just too fun and adventure-inspiring to completely forget. 16. Before we understood embryology and the intricate dance of genetics, one dominant theory was preformationism. This elegantly simple idea suggested that a sperm, according to the spermist camp, or an egg, if you sided with the ovists, contained a tiny, fully formed miniature human called a homunculus. Development was just this little person getting bigger, much like inflating a microscopic balloon animal. Some even claimed they could see the homunculus curled up inside sperm cells under early microscopes, though that was likely just wishful thinking. Specks of dust, or the power of suggestion. This led to rather mind-bending philosophical implications. If every sperm contained a homunculus, did that homunculus also contain even tinier sperm with even tinier homunculi, like infinite Russian nesting dolls of future generations all packed into one? It's a miracle anyone ever got any sleep thinking about that. Thankfully, we now know development is a bit more complex than just inflating a microscopic human. 17. In the mid-19th century, Baron Karl von Reichenbach, a respected German chemist, industrialist, and philosopher, claimed to have discovered a new fundamental force of nature called the Odic Force, or Od. This mysterious energy was supposedly radiated by pretty much everything: magnets, crystals, humans, especially their fingertips and eyes, plants, even the stars, and could be perceived by sensitives, individuals with heightened perception. These sensitives reported seeing colored auras, feeling sensations of heat or cold, or even experiencing tastes when near odd-emitting objects in darkened rooms. Reichenbach conducted countless experiments, meticulously cataloging their descriptions of the Odic emanations, believing he was on the verge of a scientific revolution. Unfortunately, no one else could ever replicate his findings in a controlled, objective way, and the Odic Force eventually faded into the realm of pseudoscience, much like that weird tingle you sometimes get when you stand up too fast. That's probably not odd. 18. Oh, France, you gave us champagne, the Eiffel Tower, and Nrays. In 1903, Prosper René Blondlot, a prominent French physicist and member of the French Academy of Sciences, announced his discovery of Nrays, a new form of radiation supposedly emitted by various substances, including certain metals and even the human body. He and his colleagues published numerous papers on their properties, claiming Nrays could be refracted by aluminum prisms, polarized, and even enhance the brightness of a dim light source. The French scientific community largely embraced it. There was just one tiny problem. Nrays didn't actually exist. American physicist Robert W. Wood visited Blondlot's lab and, in a classic bit of scientific sleuthing, secretly removed a crucial aluminum prism from the experimental setup. Blondlot and his assistant still reported observing the Nray effects, describing their properties in detail. Whoops! It was a major case of observer bias, national pride, and collective delusion. A reminder that even scientists can see what they want to believe, especially if it makes their country look good. 19. In the 1960s, Soviet scientists caused a global stir and considerable Cold War scientific panic with their discovery of polywater, or anomalous water. This wasn't your everyday H2O. It was supposedly a stable polymerized form of water with a much higher boiling point, reaching up to 500 degrees Celsius, a lower freezing point down to -40, and a syrupy consistency like Vaseline. The international scientific community went into a frenzy. Was it a new state of matter? A potential wonder material? Or, as some dramatic articles and even Kurt Vonnegut's novel Cat's Cradle, inspired by the idea, suggested, a threat to all life if it escaped and polymerized all the world's water. Turns out, after intense scrutiny, Polywater was mostly just dirty water. Samples were contaminated with silica and other impurities from the quartz capillary tubes. A classic case of, oops, didn't clean the test tubes properly, but on a global, potentially world-ending scale, at least in fiction. 20. When 19th-century astronomers like Giovanni Schiaparelli and Percival Lowell peered at Mars through their telescopes, they saw faint straight lines crisscrossing its reddish surface. Schiaparelli, in 1877, called them canali, Italian for channels or grooves, but it was widely, and rather optimistically, mistranslated into English as canals. Lowell, a wealthy American astronomer, became utterly convinced these were vast artificial waterways, an enormous irrigation system built by an intelligent, ancient Martian civilization to carry water from the polar ice caps to their dying desert world. He meticulously mapped hundreds of these canals, publishing books and lectures that captivated the public imagination and sparked decades of science fiction stories about sophisticated Martians. Alas, higher resolution images from space probes in the 20th century revealed no such canals. The lines were likely optical illusions, alignments of craters, or misinterpretations of natural geological features seen through less than perfect telescopes. So, no ancient Martian public works projects, unfortunately, just a classic case of wishful seeing. 21. This one comes with a heavy dose of yikes, and it's a chilling reminder of science misused. Cranometry, popular in the 19th and early 20th centuries, was the practice of measuring skulls, their size, shape, volume, and various bony protrusions. The underlying and deeply flawed assumption was that these physical measurements could reveal a person's intelligence, personality traits, and, most disturbingly, their supposed racial superiority or inferiority. Scientists like Samuel George Morton meticulously collected and measured thousands of skulls from different ethnic groups, developing elaborate classification systems. Unsurprisingly, these findings often conveniently supported prevailing racial biases and colonial hierarchies of the time, providing a scientific justification for discrimination and oppression. It's a stark reminder of how easily science can be twisted to justify prejudice, and how important it is to critically examine the assumptions and motivations behind any research. Thankfully, this pseudoscience has been thoroughly debunked, but its legacy is a grim one. 22. Similar to phrenology and craniometry, physiognomy was the so-called art, which was definitely more art than science, of judging a person's character, intelligence, or moral worth from their outward appearance, especially their facial features. Got a pointy nose? You must be shrewd and inquisitive. A high forehead? Clearly intelligent and noble. A weak chin? Probably lacking in willpower and easily led. For centuries, people believed you could read a person like an open book just by looking at their face. Scholars like Johann Caspar Lavater wrote extensive treatises in the late 18th century, complete with detailed illustrations on the supposed meaning of different eye shapes, lip thicknesses, jawlines, and even wrinkles. While it's true we all make snap judgments based on appearance, the idea that specific facial features reliably correlate with fixed personality traits is pure pseudoscience. Good news for those of us with resting villain face. It doesn't actually mean we're plotting world domination. Probably. 23. Hold on to your hats, because this one is cosmically bonkers and gained an almost cult-like following. Proposed by Austrian engineer and inventor Hans Herberger in the early 20th century, the Weltallslehre, or world ice theory, claimed that ice was the fundamental substance of all cosmic processes and structures. Everything, planets, moons, stars, even the Milky Way itself, was either made of ice or profoundly affected by it. Solar flares, giant blocks of ice crashing into the sun, Meteorites? Icy space debris? Saturn's rings? Obviously ice. Okay, he got that one partly right, but for entirely the wrong reasons. Lunar craters? Formed by impacting ice blocks. Herbiger's theory, developed from a vision, gained a bizarrely large and fervent following, especially in Germany and Austria, despite being ridiculed by mainstream scientists. He even reportedly said, "You believe in my theory, or you will be treated as an enemy." Talk about a chilling reception for any dissenting views on his icy universe. 24. What makes living things alive and fundamentally different from, say, a rock or a puddle? For a very long time, the answer for many philosophers and scientists was vitalism. This was the belief that living organisms are distinct from non-living matter because they contain some non-physical, vital spark, life force, entelechy, or elan vital, which was an animating principle. This mysterious essence was thought to be what organized and animated organisms, guided their development, and couldn't be explained by mere physics and chemistry alone. So, you couldn't just assemble the right chemicals in a test tube and create life. You needed that special, almost magical ingredient that transcended the material. While the idea of a life force is poetically appealing, the rise of organic chemistry, such as Wöhler's synthesis of urea, which is an organic compound from inorganic materials, and molecular biology showed that life processes, however complex, are indeed governed by physical and chemical laws. Sorry, no mystical pixie dust required for life, just some very clever carbon-based molecules doing their thing. 25. The dream of a machine that could run forever without an external energy source, a perpetual motion machine, has tantalized inventors, dreamers, and con artists for centuries. And we're not just talking about crackpots in sheds, though there were certainly plenty of those. Many serious thinkers and early scientists genuinely believed it was possible, pouring immense effort and ingenuity into designing elaborate contraptions with cleverly balanced weights, self-filling water wheels, magnets repelling each other in an endless loop, or capillary action devices. They were chasing a violation of the fundamental laws of thermodynamics, which, to be fair, weren't fully formulated for much of this time, thus making the dream seem more plausible. While these attempts always failed, sometimes spectacularly and often hilariously, they did inadvertently lead to a better understanding of mechanics, friction, and energy conservation. It's a testament to human ingenuity and our eternal quest for a free lunch, even if the universe keeps saying no and pay your energy bill. 26. Even geniuses can get it wrong sometimes, or at least be influenced by the prevailing wisdom of their era. When Albert Einstein first developed his groundbreaking theory of general relativity in 1915, his equations suggested that the universe should either be expanding or contracting. A static universe wasn't stable. But the prevailing astronomical view at the time was that the universe was, on the grandest scales, static, eternal and unchanging in its overall size. To make his equations fit this accepted idea, Einstein reluctantly introduced something called the Cosmological Constant, known as lambda, into his field equations. Basically, a mathematical fudge factor representing a repulsive force to counterbalance gravity and hold the universe still. Later, when Edwin Hubble's observations in the 1920s provided strong evidence that the universe was indeed expanding, Einstein reportedly called the cosmological constant his biggest blunder. It's a good reminder that even the most brilliant minds are shaped by the assumptions of their time. And hey, in a cosmic twist, that blunder has actually made a comeback in modern cosmology to help explain the accelerating expansion of the universe, a phenomenon now attributed to dark energy, so maybe it wasn't so blundering after all. 27. One of the most famous and elaborate scientific hoaxes of all time. In 1912, Charles Dawson, an amateur archaeologist and solicitor, claimed to have found the fossilized remains of an early human, the missing link between apes and humans, in a gravel pit in Pilt Down, Sussex, England. Pilt Down Man, whose proposed scientific name was Eoanthropus dawsoni, or Dawson's Dawn Man, had a human-like cranium and an ape-like jaw with human-like wear on the teeth, perfectly fitting some preconceived notions of what an early human ancestor should look like. The British scientific establishment was largely convinced for decades, hailing it as a major discovery that proved humanity's ancient roots in England. It wasn't until the 1950s that advanced chemical testing and re-examination revealed the truth. The cranium was from a modern human, the jaw from an orangutan, and the teeth had been deliberately filed down and stained to look ancient and fossilized. Who perpetrated the hoax remains a much-debated mystery, but Pilt Down Man stands as a cautionary tale about wishful thinking, confirmation bias, and the importance of rigorous skepticism in science, even when a discovery seems too good to be true. 28. In March 1989, chemists Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons of the University of Utah made a bombshell announcement at a press conference. They had achieved nuclear fusion at room temperature, or cold fusion, using a simple tabletop experiment involving palladium electrodes and heavy water, also known as deuterium oxide. They claimed their apparatus produced excess heat that could only be explained by nuclear reactions, along with byproducts like tritium and neutrons. The world went wild. If true, it promised a clean, virtually limitless source of energy, solving the world's energy problems overnight. Other labs scrambled to replicate their results, with intense media scrutiny. However, most couldn't. The initial excitement gave way to widespread skepticism as the claims couldn't be consistently verified. Their methods were criticized, and accusations of experimental error and even sloppiness flew. While research into low-energy nuclear reactions, often abbreviated as LN, continues in some niche areas, the dream of easy breezy cold fusion from that initial explosive announcement remains firmly in the too good to be true, and probably just bad science category for most. 29. Before Darwin and Wallace nailed natural selection, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, a prominent French naturalist, proposed a different, and for some people more intuitive, mechanism for evolution in the early 19th century. His idea, often simplified as the inheritance of acquired characteristics, suggested that traits an organism developed or acquired during its lifetime, through use or disuse, could be passed on to its offspring. The classic, though admittedly somewhat caricatured, example is the giraffe. Lamarck might have argued that ancestral giraffes stretched their necks to reach higher leaves, and this slightly elongated neck was then passed on to their babies, who stretched their necks further and so on, over generations. So, if you worked out a lot and got super buff, your kids would be born with bigger muscles. Or if a blacksmith developed strong arms, his sons would inherit them. While intuitively appealing, and some very recent epigenetic findings show a tiny bit of nuance in how environment can affect gene expression across generations, the broad strokes of Lamarckism, use it or lose it and pass it on directly, were largely superseded by Darwinian evolution through natural selection acting on random variation. 30. This is nightmare fuel and B-movie gold, but for a time it had grim scientific curiosity. The idea: a human body suddenly bursts into flames, reduced to ashes, surroundings often oddly undamaged, with no clear external ignition. For centuries, scattered, often poorly documented, accounts of alleged spontaneous human combustion, or SHC, surfaced. Early scientific guesses ranged from too many combustible humours, hello again, 4 humours, to internal chemical reactions, static electricity, or divine retribution for sin, with alcoholism being a popular 19th century theory for the cause. While many cases can likely be explained by the wick effect, clothing acting like a candle wick, fueled by melted body fat, ignited by a dropped cigarette or nearby flame, the idea of just poofing into cinders for no good reason remains morbidly fascinating and thankfully exceedingly rare, if not entirely mythical as a truly spontaneous event. 31. Step right up for invisible fluid and intense eye contact. In the late 18th century, Franz Anton Mesmer, a German physician, proposed animal magnetism, an idea later called mesmerism, a subtle, invisible natural force flowing through all living things, connecting humans, earth, and heavens. Illness, he believed, stemmed from blockages in this fluid. He cured patients by mesmerizing them, using magnets, hand passes over the body known as mesmeric passes, or intense gazes, to restore harmony. His sessions were theatrical, groups holding hands around a bouquet, a large tub of magnetized water and iron filings with protruding rods, sometimes leading to mesmeric crises like convulsions or trances, seen as healing. While animal magnetism itself was debunked by scientific commissions, who blamed suggestion and imagination? Hello, placebo. Mesmer's work inadvertently paved the way for studying hypnotism. 32. This is deeply uncomfortable, a stark warning of pseudoscience married to prejudice. Eugenics, gaining alarming popularity and respectability in the early 20th century across many Western countries, aimed to improve the human race by controlling heredity. Proponents, including prominent scientists, believed desirable traits, often ill-defined and biased by class and race, like intelligence or moral character, could be encouraged via selective breeding, so-called positive eugenics. More insidiously, they advocated eliminating undesirable traits, such as feeble-mindedness, criminality, or poverty, by preventing reproduction among groups deemed unfit, known as negative eugenics. This led to horrific policies, forced sterilizations, discriminatory laws, institutionalization, culminating in Nazi atrocities. The science was flawed, based on simplistic genetics and steeped in prejudice. It's a chilling example of scientific-sounding language justifying appalling human rights abuses. The only improvement it needed was utter discredit. 33. Today, most people view astrology as a bit of fun, a harmless horoscope in the back of a magazine, or a quirky personality guide. But for many centuries, from ancient Babylon through the European Renaissance and beyond, it was considered a legitimate, complex, and highly influential science, a sophisticated system for understanding and predicting earthly events, human destinies, and even medical outcomes by studying the positions and movements of celestial bodies. Kings, queens, and emperors employed court astrologers to guide their most important decisions of state. Physicians consulted star charts to determine the best times for surgeries or administering medicines. Complex mathematical calculations and detailed ephemerides were involved in casting horoscopes. While astronomy, which is the actual scientific study of celestial objects and phenomena, eventually diverged and demonstrated that the gravitational pull of Mars on a newborn is far less than that of the midwife in the delivery room. The allure of finding meaning and order in the patterns of the stars persisted for a very long time as a serious intellectual pursuit. It just goes to show, what's considered hard science can really change over time, sometimes for the much, much better. So, that was science. Once, kind of. From exploding eyeballs to uterus road trips and Martian irrigation systems. History proves one thing: confidence is not the same as correctness. Now here's the real question. Which modern truths will future humans laugh at the hardest? AI therapists? Gluten-free water? Flat Mars theory? Drop your boldest prediction in the comments. The dumber, the better. And hey, if your mind is still reeling from these historical curveballs, show some love with a like, subscribe so you don't miss our next descent into delightful madness, and hit that bell.